Your module in the risk dashboard advisory platform, our compliance tool. But what is GDPR? So we need to start by understanding what it actually is. So GDPR is the EU legislation which was adopted by the UK last year on May the 25th, and it provides the structure for businesses and how they should process and handle data. Primarily designed to modernise laws that protect personal information of individuals. But that said, it also boosts the rights of individuals and gives us more control over our information. In fact, I read this morning that a software developer had taken to court one of the online recruitment agencies, CV Library, because they started to send him unsolicited or unrequested emails. So he was actually an expert in data privacy. So he took them to court to say, there's nothing on your website which clearly states that I've given you permission to start marketing information to me. He won £150 in costs. But the fact is, he took a big company, to court and won, because businesses still see this opportunity to start marketing information to people at an individual level. And of course, in recent years, there have been massive data breaches. The likes of Yahoo, LinkedIn, BA very recently, and MySpace. So these accounts are now in the public domain because people have hacked organisations. And under GDPR, the destruction, loss, alteration and unauthorised disclosure of or access to people's data, that has to be reported to the country's data protection regulator, where it could have a real detrimental impact on those who it's all about. And this can include, but it's obviously not limited to, a financial loss, confidentiality breaches, and more importantly, damage to a business's reputation. Now, I can't see the likes of BA having their reputation damaged too much as the national airline carrier, but it doesn't help. So we're going to look at a couple of questions in our module when it comes to GDPR. And the first one is question 1, in fact. Has your business identified areas that could cause GDPR compliance issues, and have you recorded them against your operational risk register? Ian, do you have a GDPR policy?
We don't actually store any data at all.
Right, okay.
We don't keep anybody's data.
Right, splendid, and that's a good point then.
And that was, sorry, I didn't put the microphone up. That was some advice given to us by our governing body, if you like.
Excellent, good to hear. So you've actually taken advice, that's the most important thing as well. So as a result of answering these types of questions, you then have a set of sub-questions in this particular module. So having identified areas of non-compliance, have you employed somebody to assist your business to ensure that you're GDPR compliant? And then are you aware of the repercussions for not being GDPR compliant? Now, this could be 4% of your turnover, which could be a considerable amount of money within a fine. So the action obviously within our dashboard would be, comply with GDPR regulations. Another question to consider, which I think is the most important one when it comes to GDPR, has your business developed and implemented data protection training for your staff? Your staff are your greatest asset, but they're also your weakest link. So training is essential. So with data protection laws all set to undergo huge changes, your company and your staff, you have to be prepared. And in order to prepare for this change in legislation, it's advised that you train your staff so they're familiar with the new legislation that's being introduced. And that's all levels of staff, be that the secretaries, the directors, your HR or your IT administrators. So what you really need to do is be looking at the mechanisms in place to assess and then report these breaches to the ICO. And if you're not aware, if you do have a breach, you have 72 hours in which to respond and report this to the ICO. In fact, you should actually be registered at the ICO as an organisation. And at the Risk Dashboard, we work with qualified experts in GDPR. And yes, there is a qualification for GDPR. So my advice here is to be careful who you get your advice from. Ask to see their qualifications. And if they can't help, then I would suggest that you contact your local accountant and most certainly your local Chamber of Commerce, who can assist you on these GDPR issues. It is essential. It is legislation. Within our dashboard, we see so many audit results where businesses have still not picked up this ball or grasped the nettle to get their GDPR compliance in order.
Can I ask you, just interrupt you there, Neil, and the qualification in GDPR, is it something that anybody can train for and go after, and what's it called? How you found it?
I was hoping you weren't going to ask me that, Ian, because I work with a business called Zynex in Northampton, and all of their staff are qualified practitioners in GDPR.
And have they given you permission to tell you that?
Well, it's more of a plug for Zynex than it is for a GDPR regulation. But I work with a number of other sort of businesses within the risk dashboard who support organisations in their GDPR requirements and getting their compliance in order.
So, and the name of the actual qualification, so that people could say, have you got a BTEC in or or an O level in?
It's a diploma course. I'm just trying to think. It's a 4-letter acronym. It's something dot something
something something.
I will, Ian. Next time I'm here, I will let you know what the
Fantastic. Thank you. Sorry to put you on the spot.
No,
there. My apologies.
So if you want us to carry on, the next one we're going to be looking at is fraud.
Okay, so...
or would you rather play a tune?
Well, should we have a bit of trouble first?
Yes, let's have a bit of trouble.
Oh no, I see a spider web is tangled up with me, and I lost my head and thought of all the stupid things I'd said. And I'm caught in the middle, so I turned to run and thought of all the stupid things I'd done. And I never meant to cause you trouble, and I never meant to do you wrong. Well, if I ever caused you trouble, oh no, I never meant to do you harm. I see a spider web and it's me in the middle, so I twist and turn, but here am I in my little bubble, singing out I never meant to cause you trouble. Never meant to do you harm. They spun a web for me. They spun a web for me. They spun a web for me.
So Coldplay, they're in trouble. I don't know if anybody else remembers this, but many, many years ago, Mylene Klaus, when she was on, was it Pop Idol she was on?
I wouldn't know.
Yeah. Mylene Klaus is of course a fantastic singer. She's absolutely gorgeous, but everything she touches turns to gold. She's got the most amazing children's wear business now off the back of her singing career, and she was just sitting at a piano at an event we were at and just playing that on a grand piano, because of course she is a classically trained pianist. And they started off, she was sitting there playing it, and everybody was going about their business, setting up lights, setting up speakers, setting everything up. And when she finished and turned round, there must have been 40 or 50 people in the auditorium all sitting there just listening. Work had stopped completely. Anyway, on that basis, let's go back to the equally gorgeous Neil Campbell from the Risk Dashboard.
Thank you very much.
Yeah. Although he hasn't got the long trusselled locks that she has. So sorry, Neil, back to you.
So Ian, I've managed quite quickly through the power of Google and the internet to find out what the qualification is for GDPR.
Well, that's why I was waffling, to give you the opportunity to find it.
Practitioners. So there is a practitioner certificate in data protection, and it is pc.dp. So if you're looking to get yourself qualified to provide expert advice within the GDPR environment to businesses, then I suggest that would be the qualification that you would be looking to
And
obtain.
I suppose equally, if you're looking for somebody to come and advise you, that's the qualification that you want to be checking that person has.
It most certainly is, yeah.
So
moving on. We're going to be taking a couple of questions now out of our fraud module. So if you remember, our content in the dashboard is all about looking at resilience, helping businesses work towards adopting best practice and understanding their statutory obligations. And one of the key modules within our dashboard, of which there are 20, one is fraud. Now, if you talk to your accountant, this is one of the greatest risks to a business, not understanding your relations when it comes to your business and the risks and the resilience that you need to put in place when it comes to managing the aspects of fraud. So one of the first question in the dashboard, Ian, is, does your business have a fraud policy? And depending on how you answer this question, yes, no, not applicable, don't know. If you're saying the answer is no, we're saying, so is your fraud policy accessible to all your staff? And then, is your fraud policy, is it regularly reviewed and updated? So having an anti-fraud policy establishes guidelines for preventing and detecting and dealing with fraud. But it also sends out a clear message to staff and third parties about conduct that will not be tolerated by your organisation. And your policy should contain a set of checks and balances within the company, and the code of conduct by which you should provide to each employee on their hiring into the business. So you're setting the ground rules. So having a fraud policy is really important within a business. And another question would be, have you identified the elements in your business that may be at risk of fraudulent activity? So we're looking to help businesses, provoke thought in the risk dashboard. So as your business grows and changes, so will your anti-fraud policy. And you need to ensure that you review your policy at least once a year or after a major change. You may wish to implement a new system for checks and balances, and be certain that all staff are trained and informed should any changes be made. And additionally, it is wise to keep a record of when these changes are made. And finally, in the last question in this particular module that I'd like to cover is very much a hot topic today. POTUS, the President of the United States of America, under impeachment. And this is because of whistleblowing. So, question 10 in our risk dashboard is, do you have a whistleblowing policy? And whistleblowers are protected by law, and as such, they should not, I should say, be treated unfairly or lose their job because they have blown the whistle, so to speak. And concerns should be raised at any time about an incident that happens or in the past or is currently happening or may happen in the future. And it is important that your employees have a policy to follow for reporting incidents and are aware of their rights as whistleblowers. Now, within the dashboard, we try to help, as I've pointed out over our past interviews, we have links in our dashboard to take businesses off to understand more about what this actually means. And in this instance, we take you off to a .gov website for whistleblowing for employees. So there we are. The government actually tells you what this means. And then there's a guidance for whistleblowing for employers. So you can actually get more information about what the implications are with regards to whistleblowing. And of course, besides the President of the United States, there's what's been going on recently with Edward Snowden. And there's you could just type whistleblowing into a Google search and you'd be surprised at the results. So to summarise this morning, what have we looked at? So GDPR. It's a statutory obligation. Statutory in as much as there is something you actually do need to do to satisfy the law. And this cannot be ignored. And risks could be considerable should there be a breach. 4% of annual turnover, even for a small business, could be considerable. And of course, having a fraud policy allows you to manage all of the elements of your business that could be at risk of fraudulent activity. So 4 questions out of 2 modules, of which there are in total about 30 across those 2 elements. Next session, Ian, we're going to take a look at transport and quality. Quality is important to a business to understand what you're doing and whether you're doing it right and appreciated by your customers and clients. So how do you get in contact if you want access to the risk dashboard? As I've said before, I recommend you get in contact with your local Chamber of Commerce, most certainly with your accountant. We're working with a huge and growing number of accountants in the UK, or you can of course find more on my website at www.riskdashboard.co.uk. Thank you.
Fantastic, and thanks again for coming in. It's always interesting. It always makes me always leaves me feeling inadequate. And
all we're trying to do,
good thing.
All we're trying to do is point out the opportunities that a business needs to pick. Just kind of raise their socks, pick their game up, and just become better at what they do.
Excellent.
Lovely.
Thank you very much.
Thanks, Ian.
You're listening to Beetroot Radio, community radio for Rushton and the Nen Valley.